Tenerife, a gloomy afternoon road. A small airport suddenly became crowded. Two giant Boeing 747s, carrying over 600 passengers, unexpectedly crashed on the runway. "600 passengers perished in the fire." What was the real story? What were the causes of this tragedy? Who is to blame for this tragic accident? On March 27, 1977, Tenerife Airport. Thick fog shrouded. The runway was packed with aircraft. Due to a terrorist bombing at the nearby Gran Canaria airport, many flights had to divert to Tenerife. Among them were two of the world's largest Boeing 747s. Pan Am 1736. Captain Victor Grubbs, 56 years old, 21,043 flight hours, but only 564 flight hours on the Boeing 747. First Officer Robert Bragg, 39 years old. Flight Engineer George Warnes, 46 years old. 380 passengers and 16 crew members. Earlier, the crew of Pan Am 1736 had requested a holding pattern but was denied by air traffic control. Captain Jacob Louis Veldhuizen van Zanten, 50 years old, 11,700 flight hours, 1,545 flight hours on the Boeing 747. First Officer Klaus Mers, 42 years old, 747 flight training supervisor. Flight Engineer Willem Schroeder, 48 years old, 235 passengers and 14 crew members. The captain is an experienced pilot, regarded as a role model for KLM pilots. Tenerife Airport only has one runway and one taxiway due to its small size. Due to the diversion of large aircraft, the airport quickly became overloaded. As instructed by air traffic control, KLM 4805 was to taxi to the end of runway 30 and make a 180-degree turn to enter the takeoff position. While waiting, Captain Van Zanten decided to use the time to refuel the plane instead of waiting until Gran Canaria. He did this partly because of the strict regulations on rest and landing times imposed by the Dutch government. Unfortunately, the plan fell through when the controller announced that Gran Canaria was safe. KLM was forced to delay takeoff, causing Pan Am 1736 behind it to also wait. The Pan Am crew wanted to bypass the KLM plane, but due to a 3.7 m clearance shortfall, they were ultimately forced to stop. Over 600 people on both flights had no idea that these were the final moments of their lives. 4 hours and 56 minutes after refueling 55,000 liters of fuel, KLM was instructed to taxi the length of the runway and then make a 180-degree turn to enter the takeoff position. It took a long time for the passengers to be gathered back onto the plane because a Dutch female passenger was checking out to stay in Tenerife. 6 minutes later, the Pan Am was also instructed to taxi behind the KLM and turn on a taxiway C3, then stop and wait for the KLM to take off.
Taxi into the runway.
And leave the runway third to your left.
Third to the left, okay.
Due to the weak signal, the crew initially couldn't clearly hear whether ATC's request was to park at lane number 1 or number 3, as first and third have similar pronunciations. Due to the faded signs and fog, they couldn't identify taxiway C3. Having reached the end of the taxiway, the captain decided to turn 45 degrees on a taxiway C4, which they could see. At 5:04 p.m., KLM had taxied to the end of the runway and turned around. At this point, the windshield was covered in fog, reducing visibility to below 300 meters. Bad weather, along with the time-consuming refueling, caused the captain to become rushed and take off.
Wait a minute, we don't have ATC clearance.
Due to the bad weather, the air traffic controller could not clearly see the Pan Am aircraft and believed that it had already turned on a taxiway number 3. ATC over the radio. KLM 4805, you are cleared for Papa Beacon. Then climb and maintain flight level 90. Right turn after takeoff. Proceed heading 40 until intercepting the 325 radial from Las Palmas VOR. Due to misunderstanding the flight instructions as a takeoff clearance, the co-pilot replied, "We are now at takeoff." Because they were using the same frequency, this announcement startled ATC and the Pan Am aircraft, leaving no time for anyone to respond. At 5:06 p.m., the captain released the brakes and engaged the engine throttles, and the KLM aircraft accelerated to 260 kilometers per hour towards the Pan Am, which was only 1,400 meters ahead. To avoid confusion, Pan Am co-pilot Robert Bragg transmitted a message stating, "We're still taxiing down the runway." At the same time, ATC also communicated to KLM. The simultaneous responses from ATC and Pan Am caused radio wave interference, so KLM did not receive the signal from Pan Am. 10 seconds later, the KLM began to accelerate for takeoff. ATC sent a message to the Pan Am to report when the runway was clear. The KLM captain and co-pilot ignored this signal, while flight engineer Willem Schroeder detected the problem. The KLM engineer questioned the position of the Pan Am. Due to his relative inexperience, Willem's words were disregarded. At 5:06 and 45 seconds p.m., upon seeing a massive aircraft approaching, Captain Victor Grubbs desperately banked the controls, steering the plane towards the edge of the runway to avoid a collision. Meanwhile, Van Zanten on the KLM aircraft, upon seeing the Pan Am, realized it was too late to stop. Just 5 seconds later, the two massive Boeing 747s collided, resulting in a explosion. The KLM's front landing gear tore through the Pan Am's cockpit roof, while the left engine and remaining landing gear struck the upper right side of the Pan Am's fuselage, nearly tearing it in two. Following the collision, the KLM aircraft remained airborne for a few more seconds before crashing and sliding approximately 300 meters. The fully fueled aircraft erupted in a massive fireball, instantly killing all 324 passengers and 14 crew members. Moments after the collision, the Pan Am aircraft also caught fire. Those seated in the front of the aircraft, along with Captain Victor Grubbs, co-pilot Robert Bragg, and engineer George Warnes, managed to escape through a hole and climb onto the left wing of the Pan Am. However, they were unable to reach the ground as the distance between the aircraft and the ground was approximately 4 meters. Firefighters arrived on the scene, but they only saw the burning KLM aircraft and were unaware that another damaged aircraft was located 450 meters away. 70 passengers on the Pan Am aircraft attempted to jump to escape. Initially, all of them survived, but 9 passengers later succumbed to their severe injuries. Immediately following the incident, approximately 70 investigators from Spain, the Netherlands, the United States, and the 2 airline companies launched a large-scale investigation to determine the cause of the catastrophic accident. The investigation concluded that the main reason for the accident was that Captain Van Zanten took off without clearance. This error was because he wanted to depart early to avoid violating KLM's working hour regulations and due to the deteriorating weather conditions. Ultimately, the Dutch national airline acknowledged their crew's responsibility for the incident and agreed to pay $110 million in compensation to the families of the victims. In addition, there were many indirect causes that contributed to the incident. If there had not been a terrorist attack, the Pan Am would have been allowed to circle and then land as originally scheduled. The KLM would not have delayed takeoff to refuel. The signal might have been better, or all the delayed flights could have waited for better weather before resuming operations. But all of that is just what-ifs. Thank you everyone for watching, and see you again.